Welcome to the What If It's Not Depression podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Achina Stein. And today we are going to be talking about complex trauma and polyvagal theory. And hold on, before we continue, I just want you to click the like button and hit subscribe if you like this episode, and I'm sure you will. Today, I'm going to be interviewing Deb Dana. She is a licensed clinical social worker, consultant, author, and speaker specializing in complex trauma. Her work is focused on using the lens of polyvagal theory to understand and resolve the impact of trauma in our lives. She is a founding member of the Polyvagal Institute, consultant to Chiron Clinics, and advisor to Unite. Deb's work shows how an understanding of polyvagal theory is applicable across the board to relationships, mental health, and trauma. She delves into the intricacies of how we can all use an understanding of the organizing principles of polyvagal theory to change the way we navigate our daily lives. Deb is well known for translating polyvagal theory into a language and application that is both clear and accessible, and for pioneering rhythm of regulation methodology, tools, techniques, and practices, which continue to open up the power of polyvagal theory for professionals and curious people from diverse backgrounds and all walks of life. She is well published and has audio programs, which will be in the show notes for your perusal. Welcome, Deb.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
Yeah, I've been hoping to have you on my podcast for like 6 months now. But
we finally did it. We finally
did it. Yes, I talk about you all the time with my patients, and I really wanted to have this episode to share with them, so that we can really get into the nitty-gritty about what is driving complex trauma, as well as what can we do about it, and so then people connect to different things and find some things work, but other things don't work. And so you're just one more resource that I think will be helpful to my patients, and whoever else is watching, So I'm always looking for opportunities to help people. And you are one person that I've been stalking kind of, and wanting to have you on board. So here you are. So I would love for you to just briefly tell us, how did you get into this? I know you've been working with other people. It would be great to just give us a thumbnail version of your work. And so we want to spend most of our time talking about what it is and what to do about it, right?
Absolutely. And that's really how I got into this, because I read Steve Porges's book, which people, you either love the deep science read of it or you find it hard to read. I've always loved reading research. I read his book and I thought, oh my gosh, this is a missing piece of the puzzle in my work with my clients. And so I reached out to him and said, would you come do a training for my practice group? And he came, and that was sort of it. We met. I was already playing around with ways to apply it, and he thought that was great, and I learned more from him about the science. And it was sort of like we found kindred spirit in each other. And
right.
And that kind of, but do you ever have those moments when your life changes and you didn't know it at the time?
Right.
It was one of those sort of moments. And so from then on, and that was 2012 or 13, and so it hasn't been that long. It's been a little over a decade, but I've now, my passion is now to bring polyvagal theory to not only the clinical world, which is where I started, but to everyday humans who are just struggling with what I would say is their nervous system's dysregulation. That's really how I see the world now: regulated, dysregulated. So we'll talk about that, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. And Steve Porges is a researcher primarily. He's not a clinician. So thank God that you were able to connect with him, because you kind of translated his work into bite-sized bits that can actually be applied into daily life. Yeah. So let's get down into it. We've been saying this polyvagal theory. What is polyvagal theory?
Yeah. Well, polyvagal theory, it really very simply is the theory of how your autonomic nervous system works. And your autonomic nervous system is where everything begins, right? We think it begins in the brain, but it really doesn't. It begins in your body with your nervous system, and then your nervous system communicates to your brain. And your brain's job is to make up a story to make sense of what it just heard from your body. So for me, I had always taught my clients about the brain because I think it's important to understand how this thing works, all of this. And then when I learned polyvagal, I thought, okay, we need to learn about the nervous system, because it is the nervous system that's creating the stories. So we get underneath the stories. You know, we all love story, right? Humans love stories.
Mm-hmm.
And when we get into a protective state, when our nervous system takes us to a protective state, we get stuck in particular survival stories.
Mm-hmm.
And rather than trying to change the story, which is way many clinicians work, because that's how we were trained, rather than changing the story, we
Right.
go underneath the story and we work with the state, because as your body changes state, and we'll talk about that in a minute, your behaviors, your feelings, and your stories will organically change. So it's like going with the flow rather than pushing against, right? And I always think, if I can find a way to go with the flow so that I feel successful, my clients feel successful, that's where I want to go.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So tell us more about that. Let's get under the hood a little bit more about how that looks, what it looks like. If you can give examples, that would be awesome. Yeah.
So I teach 3 basic principles. So let's take them one at a time and feel them here, and then do a little practice. So the first one is a word that we have to learn first, which is neuroception. So neuroception is the word that Steve created, which really illustrates how the nervous system takes in information. So the nervous system doesn't use the brain pathways to take it in. It uses these body pathways. So it listens to what's happening inside your body. And for many of us and most of my clients, that was a hard place to go, right? What's happening in here? I don't know, because I live from here up, right? If you're a trauma survivor, you live neck up, right? It's hard to go in there. So that's okay. That's just one pathway. The other pathway is what's happening out there in the world around you. So it's listening there to see, does it feel safe or unsafe? And the third pathway is between. So your nervous system and my nervous system are getting to know each other right now, right? And they're listening sort of and making a judgment. Does this feel safe or not safe? Right? All without the benefit of the thinking parts of your brain, which I find so fascinating, right? It's
Right.
like, if you have that gut instinct,
Right.
you know, we sometimes call it intuition. That's your nervous system. That's
Right.
really what it is. So, you know, when a client had a gut instinct, ooh, I needed to get out of there. I said, oh, did you follow it?
Yes.
Because that was your nervous system telling you something,
Right.
right? And, you know, I really think that we should follow what our nervous system says. And then afterwards, we can reflect and we can think, was that necessary? Was that based on accurate in this moment information, or was it based on past experience that
Right.
came alive in this moment? But in the moment that your nervous system is giving you a strong message, I would listen to it, do what it says, and then we can take it apart later, right? So, and that I think was hard for clients, because they often didn't trust what their body was telling them, right? And so we had to sort of negotiate with, let's listen, let's learn how to listen. So if we do that, you know, tiny practice right now, you know, can we find, and I always start with one cue of safety and one cue of danger in each of those pathways, right? So if we listened inside, and I know that's hard, but you might find a place, a cue of danger might be a place that feels painful. It might be a place that feels numb, right? It might be a place that's a little distressing to you, right? So that's a cue of danger. Maybe you find one of those inside. A lot of my clients would have a headache, or would have a backache, or a stomach ache, right? That's nervous system giving you information. So find one cue of danger, and then can you find one cue of safety, right? Which may simply be a place that feels neutral, right? It may be a place that feels warm or loose or spacious, but neutral's fine,
Right.
right? Not pain is okay. That's a cue of safety, right? So we start there and just notice one cue of danger, one cue of safety. Then let's move into the environmental world. So in the place you are right now, where you're listening to this conversation we're having, can you look around and can you find one cue of safety and one cue of danger? Right. And for most of my clients, and for me actually as well, the environmental cues are so much easier to find. Right. I can touch them, I can feel them, I can see them. They're easier. So one cue of safety, one cue of danger. And a cue of safety for me is I have a window right there that looks out into the green trees. It's always a cue of safety for me. Right. I love that. Cue of danger changes moment to moment. It's too hot, it's too cold, it's, you know, the cat's wandering around, I'm afraid he's going to jump, all these things, right? So
yeah. For me, it's looking at pictures of my children when they were babies.
Yeah, right. And a cue of danger?
Cue of danger, bad weather.
Yeah. Sometimes for me, it's because you can only see back here, you can't see what's over there. And sometimes what's over there is very disorganized, and that's a cue of danger to my nervous system, right?
Right.
Unsettling. So there are a lot of things that can be.
I'm sure there's others. I just couldn't come up with real quickly. Yeah. Sometimes you have to sit there and think about it, you know, and listen to your body. And absolutely. Yeah.
And then the third is that between. So, you know, you and I can use each other's nervous systems, but people who are listening can use someone who's around them or can bring someone to mind and can just see where's a cue of safety and where's a cue of danger. Right. So cue of safety is you have a lovely smile and you're looking, it feels like you're looking right at me and smiling. And that is a sense of connection to my nervous system. You know, a cue of danger was, you know, our listeners won't know it, but a cue of danger was when you disappeared for a moment.
Oh, yeah.
You were picking something up or doing something. And it was like, oh my gosh, where'd she go? Right. So that was a cue of danger. Even though I could figure it out afterwards, in the moment, it was like, So it's so fascinating, right? Because those things happen all the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's neuroception. And the basic thought about neuroception is if the cues of safety outweigh the cues of danger, we feel safe enough to navigate the world with a bit of organization and clarity and connection and all those beautiful things. If the cues of danger outweigh the cues of safety, we go into a survival response.
Right.
And it's that simple. I know it's not easy, but it's that simple to really think, oh, I just disconnected and now I'm in anxiety. And if I go back to the safety danger equation, I'm going to figure out how did that shift? Right.
Yeah. You clearly have become very attuned to that because you were able to pick up on it right away. And most people need to start training themselves in that way, including me.
Well, yes. I mean, and this is I call this befriending your nervous system. And this is the beginning of befriending, is to spend some time, you know, stop over the course of your day and just think, you know, what are the cues of safety, cues of danger that neuroception is bringing me in this moment, or that it brought me before, right? You might do an end of the day reflective practice and think, ooh, maybe I can find all the cues of safety, all the cues of danger, and begin to write them down, because it is practice that helps us get used to knowing, oh, that's a cue of danger. Right. And as soon as we know what the cues of danger are, we can begin to work with them. Right. We can begin to reduce them. So a lot of the cues of danger were targets for therapy with my clients. Right. There were these ways that the system kept getting hijacked by a cue of danger. Right. And so we began to bring that into active awareness and name it. Notice a name is one of the things that's so powerful to do. If I just notice, oh, I'm feeling anxious, and I name, that's a cue of danger to my nervous system, it will begin to shift it.
Right. And it could respond, your nervous system can respond in many different ways. It could be flight, fight, freeze, eat. You know, sometimes people come to me feeling dizzy or lightheaded, and that's like almost like a faint reaction.
Yep.
And well, I
That's
don't
one
know
of
why
your,
that happens. Every so often I feel this way. And gee, I wonder if it's connected to, right?
yeah, yeah. So,
Yeah.
so let's go there next, because now you're talking about the states of the nervous system, right? And the
Mhm.
way the nervous system travels between states,
Right.
right? And Steve's brilliant work identified a particular way we do that, right?
Hmm.
So that's we call it the hierarchy, because at the top is the place of safety and connection, right? The neuroception is one of safety. Cues of safety outweigh the cues of danger. We call it the ventral vagal place, right?
Hmm.
That's the scientific name for it. I invite you to name it in any way you want. And my clients
Hmm.
would say the place of, the sunny place, the happy place, the connected place, any way you'd like to call it, right? But
Right.
in that place, we feel organized enough,
Hmm.
right? Safe enough,
Right.
regulated enough. It's not maybe I'm not fully regulated, don't fully feel safe, but I have enough of it active and alive in my system, so I feel, oh, I can do this, right? And that's the place I believe the nervous system longs to be in. I think every human nervous system wants to get to that place of
Hmm.
regulation. And I actually believe it knows how to get there, but all of this stuff gets in the way, covers up the pathways. Our traumatic experience, our ongoing daily overwhelm gets in the way. So when we can move a bit of that out, the nervous system can bring us back to that place of regulation,
Right.
right? I'm going to send you what I call the personal profile map that, and directions for filling it out, which helps you really get to know in this place what happens in my body. How does your body let you know you're in a place of regulation, readiness, curiosity, right? All these lovely experiences. How does your body let you know? And then what do you think? What do you feel? What do you do when you're in this place? That's how we get to know the state of regulation,
Right.
right? The first survival state that we go to when the world begins to feel too much is that place of fight and flight.
Hmm.
And most of us know that place well,
Right.
because we humans go there often in little ways all the time, in big ways sometimes,
Right.
right? So that little bit of anxiety or that little bit of frustration it's called the sympathetic nervous system. It's
Right.
that fight flight place that's beginning to activate. And it does that because your nervous system is beginning to feel that the cues of danger are getting too big.
Right.
Right?
Right. And some people are in fight flight all the time, even when they think they're
Yeah.
calm, they're still in fight flight. And so they consider the panic and the
Yes. To
highly
be
distressing being fight flight, but then they might regulate down, but they're still fight flight. They're not down here where they need to be.
right, right. And it's interesting because if you grew up in an unsafe world without people who were safe around you to help you regulate, that's one of the choices your nervous system could make. It could take you to sympathetic fight flight
Mhm.
because you need to survive, and so you need to act, to do, to seek. There's a drivenness to
Right.
that place, right? And it's interesting because I had many clients who were highly successful but highly dysregulated,
Mhm.
right? You probably have a lot of patients who are successful and dysregulated, so they're suffering,
Right.
successful but suffering,
Right.
right? And the interesting thing is when they get a taste of ventral regulation and understand that it's safe to be there and they can still be successful,
Right.
then they want to go there, right?
Right.
But there's a fear that if I give up this being driven,
Right.
first I'll be unsafe, but then I'll also be unsuccessful, right?
Right. A
And
lot of
really,
people make that erroneous connection, that you don't have to be stressed in order to be successful because
right,
they see that as the driving factor, or they make the connection that in order to meet these goals, I have to constantly crack that whip on myself.
right. And in fact, the nervous system doesn't respond well to that, right?
Hmm.
The nervous system will go deeper and deeper into dysregulation. And
Hmm.
interestingly, as soon as you leave the regulation of ventral and you travel into that sympathetic fight, flight, anger, anxiety, your prefrontal cortex does not work in the way we need it to.
Mhm.
Right. So there's a consequence to moving into survival, which is you can't think and plan the way you need to. You
Mhm.
can't see options. You can't be creative.
Right.
Right. And again,
And
it's not because you don't want to, but your biology won't allow it anymore.
right, right.
Mhm.
And what happens is that you end up having diagnoses like attention deficit disorder or anxiety or depression. It shows up like that.
Mhm.
And you also start having physical symptoms that
Absolutely.
are reflux
Yep.
and joint pain and muscle tension, headaches,
Yeah.
right?
Yes. Yeah, because your nervous system manages all of that too, which
Right.
is so fascinating. It does physical and psychological, all of it. And so if we can become a bit more regulated in our nervous system, those things will begin to reduce,
Hmm.
right? Rather than taking a pill or having, some other intervention like that, which treats the symptom,
Right.
go
Downstream.
underneath the symptom, because the symptom is your nervous system trying to tell you something,
Right.
right? So rather than just quieting the symptom, if we go underneath and listen to the nervous system, we find out, oh, this is what it's telling me. And usually with those clients, those patients, it's telling them you can't keep doing this in this way. It
Right.
is unsustainable, right?
It is. It is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Carrying that platter with all the things falling off of it.
Mhm.
It's like
Mhm.
you need to stop and you really need to check as to what you're doing to your mind, body, and spirit and really reset, find some balance.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the fight flight, which we're really familiar with. But the other survival response that polyvagal theory shows us is what's called dorsal vagal, but it's this shutdown, collapse, disconnect. All of that overwhelming, driven energy from sympathetic drains away, and you're left with no energy, no interest,
Mm-hmm.
no ability to move through the world with purpose or passion
Mm-hmm. Or drive.
or drive. Yeah, which is that other survival response. And that's a hard one, because we see people who are that like that, who are listless, who are, we make up a story about them. They're not trying, they don't care, they
Right.
could do it if they wanted, all of these things. Our brains look
Mhm.
over there and make judgment about
Right.
it.
They're
When
lazy.
really, right, what we need
Yeah.
to do is look at someone and say, oh, they're dysregulated, in a state of collapse. They are unable to have the energy to do whatever it is that we
Mhm.
think they should do, right? And so the work there becomes, how do we bring some energy back,
Right.
right? And for people who have been judged, many trauma survivors have been judged for being in a state of collapse, right?
Mhm.
People will often say, well, if that was me, I would have done this. You have no idea what
Right.
you would have done, because it's your nervous system that's making the choice for you. It is not your brain. It is not a cognitive decision. It is a biological one. And your
Right.
nervous system is simply doing whatever it needs to do to help you survive. That's its job, right?
Right.
So it frustrates me when people, look over there and make a judgment, because, say,
Mhm.
oh, nervous system is simply trying to keep this person safe
Mhm.
and
Right. Right.
well. Yeah.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be serious trauma. It can be trauma with a
Oh,
little t too, just not feeling safe in an
yeah.
environment,
Yeah.
especially as a child growing up, through a tough situation
Yeah.
that for them, if they're particularly sensitive, was
Mhm.
taken, very hard. So it's a combination of your personality and how you connect with the world
Mhm.
that can cause a certain response
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
different for everybody. Another person would have responded differently, and it doesn't necessarily have to be serious trauma. So, how does one
Mhm.
recognize that they're in that state? What are some clues?
If you to recognize you're in shutdown, is really again, we're looking for, how does your body show you? So usually there's a lack of energy, right? A lethargy of some sort. I often think of, I go to this place, my system takes me there for protection. It feels like I'm going through the motions, but I
Mm-hmm.
don't have the energy to really care about anything. So
Mm-hmm.
it's that sort of a flavor.
Mm-hmm.
You know, your thoughts have some sort of flavor of giving up. Why bother?
Mm-hmm.
It's no use. It's that sort of a place, right? So no energy, thoughts of failure, hopelessness. Why bother? Nobody's ever gonna be there. Why reach out? There won't be anybody there. It's that sort of a feeling, right? Behaviors are often, you might stay in bed. You might not want to get dressed. You might not show up to do things. You might just begin to isolate. Those are all the behaviors that happen there, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. And then, that's often given a diagnosis of major depression, what you described,
Exactly.
which is a label,
The
but root
label.
causes. And how do you distinguish that from chronic fatigue syndrome? Right.
Again, the interesting work is, as you know, in the medical world, and beginning to think chronic fatigue is a dysregulated nervous system,
Mm-hmm.
right? I am not I have no, medical training at all, and I would have clients who come with a psychological issue and a medical issue because they go together,
Of
right? You get the same the other way, right? So, and I would say, I don't know
Right.
about your chronic fatigue, your irritable bowel, your, all of these things. Nowadays, it's long COVID that people are
Right.
talking, but it's connected to your nervous system. So the work that we're going to do to help bring more regulation to your nervous system is going to have an impact.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see what happens, right? The same is true for someone who suffers from depression and they come on, on meds,
Right.
usually more than one med because they've been suffering and nothing's working. And
Right.
if you can, have a med provider, like, I'd love to work with you as a med provider because, you would say, let's see, let's regulate, and then let's see what we need to do. Let's change the medication and see,
Right.
right? Because
Right.
medication's not going to regulate a nervous system. It's going to, you know,
Doesn't do
change.
any of
No,
that.
right, right. Although we'd like that, we'd like to take a pill and be done, right?
Right.
But
Exactly.
clients really found amazing things happening as they began to befriend and regulate, right? So that, I think, is the hopefulness of working with the nervous system. So, working with someone who's, yes, diagnosis of depression is the most common, psychological one for this shutdown place, and
Right.
chronic fatigue, irritable bowel, all of these things happen there. So yeah, to figure out again, how do we take gentle steps? And in shutdown, it's a very gentle process. Can I
Mhm.
bring just a little energy back in? Right. I would love it when clients would have a rocking chair and they could just rock in the rocking chair, or a
Mhm.
glider, or some way of just getting their body to move without it being hard to do.
Right.
Because when you're in collapse, everything is hard to do. Everything hurts. Everything feels hopeless. So what can we do that makes it really, really easy? So for everybody listening, I think every house should have something that moves, some piece of furniture that moves.
Right. Rocking chairs.
It's
I love the rocking chair because it also, when you're moving those feet, and you're, at least if you are so tired and weak, or physically unable to even take a walk down the street, a
yeah,
rocking chair and move helps to have lymphatic drainage, just moving your feet in that chair. And you're
yeah,
right, the rocking is very soothing and regulating, and it's a place of safety, creating a place of safety and regular movement. It's an awesome way to start
yeah,
if
yeah.
you're that depleted.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the other things, what can you hold something that just has a little bit of, we're just looking for tiny movement, right?
Mm-hmm.
So something that you can squeeze just a little, or something that you can rub, just something that moves your extremities in small ways, because that will begin to
Mm-hmm.
bring some energy back. And we don't want a lot of energy, because if you have a flood of energy, you end up back in fight flight.
Mm-hmm.
And then your system says, oh, this feels really scary. Let me go back to collapse. It's much safer here.
Right.
Right. And we see that often with, in the clinical world, we see that a lot. Clients will begin to come back to life, so to speak, and it feels overwhelming and terrifying. And they go back, they dive back into shutdown, because they, you know, like you were saying before, some clients know how to live in sympathetic. Other
Right.
clients just know how to live
Yeah.
in disconnect,
Right.
right?
Right.
And
It's
so we have,
safer. It's
yeah, it's
safer.
safer. It's
Yes.
where their system found safety
Right.
with whatever was going on. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's I want to make it clear that this is not a conscious decision. You know,
Yeah.
it's
No.
the body's decision, and the mind just is forced to go with it in a way.
Yes.
And
Yes.
you could try all you want, it will not take over. Your brain cannot take over when you recognize, like, why am I not moving? Why can't I do this? Well, I want to do this, but I can't.
Right.
It's because you have, I love the way you say it, you have to befriend your nervous system and
Yeah.
create opportunities of safety, taking it by its hand and saying, look, this is safe. Look, this is safe. What you're reacting to is a memory of what happened years ago. But
Yes.
and so, but being able to come out of that place and be able to see it and then change the story, right? It's like that happened years ago, but now it's not happening now,
Yeah.
making different decisions.
I use a simple discernment question with people. You just simply ask yourself, in this place, so where am I right now? In this moment, so in the present moment, with these people, if you're around others, is this response needed? And
Mhm.
so you turn toward your system and you think, is this needed in this moment, right? And sometimes you'll get the answer, absolutely, great. Celebrate that. Thank your nervous system.
Mhm.
I do this practice all the time when it feels like something doesn't feel quite like it's in sync. The answer I usually get is, ooh, not needed. Right, right. Because it was a flavor of something from the past that came alive in the present moment and took me down the old pathway. Right. I don't need to isolate and collapse now. I did 30 years ago, but I don't now. Right.
Right.
But if I can bring awareness to that, then I have a chance of making a different choice.
Mhm.
But it's that awareness. So that question is a simple question to ask yourself. And I would write that on a card for my clients and they just pull out the card. Because in the moment it's hard to remember. But they
Mhm.
could pull out a card and go, let me read that. Oh, okay. Not needed. Right?
Right.
That's an
Right.
old response. Nervous system hasn't been updated yet. That's all. That's all it is.
Right.
Right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Can you just repeat for the audience what that question is?
Yeah. In this moment,
Mhm.
in this place, with these people, is this response needed?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Simple, easy, brings awareness, puts your focus on the nervous system's response in a curious way, because this is about curious, right? And we say, is it needed? Not is it appropriate, because that's a judging question, but is
Right.
it needed?
Right.
Right? Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I'm glad you distinguished it. Is it appropriate? Is not really, yeah,
Mm.
I love the way you distinguish the two. Yeah.
Because
Because you have to respect, you need to respect your nervous system
yes.
in what it's doing. You might not like it,
Right. I mean,
but
yeah, right. I mean, sometimes we look and we say, well, that was a crazy thing to do or think or say. And then you can go back and think, how did that happen? Because your nervous system brought that, right? And there's a reason for it. So you can be curious about why would it do that? And you can begin to explore, right? But
right,
if we self blame, if we have those critical voices, if we judge ourselves, then
right.
we go deeper into a survival state, a state of protection.
Exactly. Oh, how stupid could I been? I can't believe I did that, right?
Exactly.
Oh, I'm so embarrassed. Or I feel
Exactly.
so guilty. Like even, there's all a whole range of symptoms or feelings that you can have in response to that. But if you just acknowledge this is the way my nervous system reacted,
Mhm.
and just appreciate all the emotions that come up around it. But then it's just starting with, this is how my nervous system reacted to this situation. Does it
Mhm.
make sense for now? And if not, why, it made sense for when I was 10, but not necessarily now. Looking at how it could, the consequences, and how can I change it for the next time? Because there will always be a next time.
Always.
Mhm.
It's interesting because a lot of the work in the befriending phase of this practice is gathering information, getting to know your nervous system, getting to sort of explore how did it get shaped in this way, because it's shaped every moment,
Mhm.
right? And it's where you are in this moment is not where you're going to be an hour from now. That's
Mhm.
the beauty of it, that you're not stuck in the patterns you're living with right now. Your nervous system can always reshape. And I think that, again, is such a hopeful message to hold
Mhm.
on to. I'm not stuck in this pattern. Yeah, I go there a lot, but I can shape it in a new way.
Right.
Right. And also I want to go back to, you said, it can be small little things that add up that
Mhm.
create a pattern of protection. It doesn't have to be a big trauma. The
Right.
nervous system takes in all of the little things. And if there's no way to make sense of them, if there's no way to bring them in and organize around them, they become traumatic to the nervous system.
Mhm.
So, people saying, "Oh, I didn't have trauma," we go back and we
I
begin
know.
to
Mhm.
hear their story. I said, when that thing happened and you didn't have anybody to talk to and help you understand, even if it was something little like, you forgot your lunch
Right.
and you were really embarrassed by that, and there wasn't anybody to help you make sense of it, it
Right.
landed in your system as something that felt not okay, a neuroception of danger.
Right.
And every time those little things come in and find each other, the neuroception of danger increases and it creates a pattern. So maybe you got really big and loud, that fight flight protective response, or
Right.
maybe you got really small and wanted to be invisible. Those
Right.
are the choices the nervous system has,
Right.
right? All because of some little event that felt big in your nervous system.
Absolutely. I mean, it could be as simple as a move,
Yep.
moving from one town to another town. And even though you might cognitively understand, my father got a new job but you might be missing people or people who were, a nanny, even like losing a nanny and going into preschool and missing that person and parents getting busy with their jobs. I mean, divorce is really common now, and and lots of people settle into new relationships, but some divorces are more traumatic than others, and it's again, it comes down to children having different nervous systems. And even though there might be an outcome, let's say 5 or 10 years later, where things settle in and you get used to the new relationship, but just the process can be still pretty traumatic. And you, especially if it's at a young age, you start developing habits or
Yep.
reactions or responses to those early times, even though it might have settled out. It's just
Mhm.
those early responses to those early times of those transitions could have been traumatic with a little t,
And then that early pattern of how I tried to survive back then, something happens, 40 years later, and it feels some way the same to my nervous system, and I'm right back there in that pattern, right?
Exactly.
And then you look and go, what was that? I think, oh, that was my nervous system, the way it protected me long, long ago, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's just sitting there waiting to be there to protect you.
Yep.
Right here, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah. And we have to be able to say thank you and right.
Exactly.
And
Thank you.
right. So
Exactly. Exactly. So I think just this awareness is just why I'm so happy we're having this conversation. Just the awareness of like, wow, that can happen. Like, yeah, it can happen.
forever too. It's interesting. I mean, I've been working with my nervous system now for a long, long time, and I'm still surprised all the time by what happens. You go, huh, interesting. It's like, okay, I can at least, have enough reflective ability now to not get pulled in and go, oh my God, but it's like, really still? So yeah, yes, and how we measure change? We measure change by measuring the frequency, the intensity, and the duration. So does that old pattern happen less often? Yes. So the
Mhm.
frequency has changed. Does it feel less intense? Does it not take me so deeply into fight, flight, or collapse? Yes. So that's changed. And does it not last as long? Yes.
Yes.
So those are all markers of change. That's really what we're looking for. Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I do that in my practice when I see patients, in sessions. It's like, okay, yeah, I used to complain about these symptoms. Where are they now in those, we're using those through markers.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. So let's get down into, let's shift over to what can we do about this? What can we do about it? And how do we start making changes besides the awareness and
Yeah.
noticing,
Yeah.
getting the
Well,
cues?
it's interesting. I want to do a couple practices, but I also wanted to just mention, because we touched briefly on that third organizing principle of connection to safe others, co-regulation, because you touched on it when you talked about how common divorce is nowadays, and it's that disruption of connection, right? On a nervous system level, disruption of connection feels traumatic. So
Mhm.
even when we do it really well, there's still a sense of disruption. So we want to recognize that, there are losses that happen all the time in our life around losing people, losing connection, losing friendships. For a while during the pandemic, we lost all connection, and the
Right,
nervous system really struggled,
right.
right? For many of my clients here in Maine, they were alone in the world. Loneliness
Yes.
is a huge um, has a huge impact on both your physical and your social um, well-being, right? And it's
Mhm.
through the nervous system,
Right,
right? So that lack of connection. So I just wanted to mention that, and many of your listeners may be, struggling to find connection,
right,
right? And
right, right.
so, where do we find that connection? It's hard to do in the world we live in nowadays, I think.
Absolutely.
So
Or the other extreme of, where do we have toxic connections
yeah,
that
yeah,
are forcing our nervous systems to keep us safe and not recognizing, well, the reason my nervous system is doing this is because I'm always faced with toxic people around me,
yeah.
or not necessarily toxic, but just not feeling safe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we all could think about the people in our life and probably find someone whose nervous system is just really challenging for us to be around.
Right.
They're wired in a way that my nervous system says this is hard work. And I
Right.
don't have to lay any blame or any meaning on that. It just simply is, this is hard for me, and I'm going to downsize the amount of time that I
Right.
spend with
Right.
them. Right.
Right. And it may not necessarily be anything that they're doing wrong. They could just be intimidating. They might have a demeanor or
Mm,
that, or even like a loud voice or
yep,
right,
exactly.
the way they carry themselves could not feel safe. Not that they're doing anything wrong.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's again that information gathering we do. We can look at a relationship and go, what are the qualities that feel safe and connecting to me? What are
Mhm.
the qualities that feel dangerous and disconnect? Right.
Mhm.
I would imagine with you, your clients feel safe and connected when they're with you, and they can use that as a template. What is it about the relationship here
Mhm.
that feels good to my nervous system? And I can identify what that is, then I can go look for it out there in the world,
Right.
right? And I can compare the relationships I have. Do they have these qualities or not? And I can begin to understand through my nervous system. I can make decisions there rather than here, because when we go here, boy, we can go into crazy places, can't we?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's, and you're right that the people call it intuition, but it really, that intuition is your body giving you signals that you're clued into it, but you don't necessarily have words to describe it. Right.
And
And
we often override that, right?
ex-
And my nervous system will give me a strong message, and my brain will say, "Oh no, it's okay. Do this anyway." And then I end up doing it, and my nervous system goes, "Told you so," because it's horrible. It's like, "Oh my God, why am I right?" So
exactly.
we have to kind of let the brain and the nervous system work together.
Absolutely, absolutely. There's a great book called Fear. Uh,
Mm,
I'm forgetting the author's name, but it's about how people who listened to their bodies actually saved their lives
right.
by really listening to their body, giving them signals like the hair on the back of their neck going up,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like
Yes. Yeah.
there is this primitive, I feel like there's this primitive part of us that probably allowed us to survive as long as we have.
Yeah.
But it's probably why animals know. It's not just that their hearing is more sensitive, they're just listening to their bodies and responding to them. And we have that too.
We
Right?
do. We need to learn to turn toward it. And I think many of us, or most of us growing up, were not taught to turn toward it.
Right.
Right. That would be something that, if I was starting over and raising kids now, I'd pay attention to helping my kids tune in, turn toward, tune in,
Yes.
listen, and let's hear what's going on in there. So yeah. Yeah. So one of the one of the practices I love is the glimmer practice,
Mhm.
because glimmers are the tiny moments of regulation that happen all the time, but we miss them. We don't notice them. We don't mark them. Right. And the thing I love about noticing the glimmers is that it's not a form of toxic positivity. So it's not saying, just look for the glimmers and forget everything bad that's happening.
Right.
What it really does is every time you find a glimmer, it lands in your system and they begin to accumulate, and it allows you to have more access to regulation. And the more access you have to regulation, the more you can turn toward the distress and work with it rather than simply being distressed by it.
Right.
Right. So glimmer practice is I think the one thing I'd like to share with your listeners, because the first step is, how do you recognize that you've bumped into a glimmer? And that's the beautiful place to start, right? How do you know? And maybe some people get a feeling in their body that feel, all of a sudden they feel some energy moving, or they feel warm or something, right? I don't particularly go to my body. I'm more of a thought person. So my attention will go somewhere and I go, oh, and I'll see like a bird. There's a bird singing, or there's some music, or someone smiled at me. So mine comes in more through my cognitive down pathways. So any way it comes is perfectly fine. So first thing to do is to figure out, how do you know you've seen a glimmer, right? And then the next step is simply to stop and appreciate it for just a few seconds. So it's just easy to reach for practice. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So see, stop, appreciate. That's all you have to do. And then the next parts are add-ons, if you want, share, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because again, remember, we love to be in connection with others. So how can you share a glimmer? And I have people who find a glimmer buddy, create glimmer groups. If you look on Instagram, apparently they're all over the place on Instagram. It's people, because you get joy out of letting someone know, here was a glimmer for me.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other person receives that and gets some joy too. So it's this lovely thing. So see, stop, appreciate, share, and then remember, right? How do you remember your glimmers? And, I have a lot of people who would write them down, people who would, I had some clients who are amazing artists. They draw their glimmers, they take pictures of. I've just actually finished writing a glimmer journal that will be out next year, because I'm so dedicated to helping people notice those glimmers,
Right.
because those tiny little moments will very gently begin to
Mm-hmm.
shift your system in a new way. And it's the gentleness that I love,
Right.
gently
Right.
and joyfully as well, because they're the fun little moments. So that glimmer practice, I would.
Right. I mean, yeah, I could see people who are in in a state of feeling unsafe. It feels like the whole world is unsafe, especially with what's on television
Yes.
and shows and and video games. It's just like
Mm,
it really
mm,
does feel unsafe. I could see why people would think that it's safe,
absolutely.
but it is. I think you're right that there are other people who recognize these things that are happening in the world, but they still feel safe. And why is that? It's probably because they've already intuitively collected all of these glimmers on their own, not even realizing it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it is a way to remind yourself throughout the day about you're collecting safe cues, basically, safety cues.
Tiny ones, tiny. I would have clients who were living in dangerous situations and really were, in survival mode most of the time. And yet they could find a glimmer, right?
Mhm.
One glimmer, that's all we need. And then, because the minute you find a glimmer, it feels good, right? And so your nervous system and your brain partner, and they say, oh, let's look for more. right? It's, again, I'm always looking for things that are easy to reach for and easy to be successful with. So glimmers are certainly that. The other thing that I would offer are anchors and touchstones, which are another version of finding a moment of regulation. And anchors are things that we identify. This helps me feel a bit of safety, a bit of regulation. And I start with, is there a person in your life? Right. For many of my clients, there were no people, but they had a pet. So is there a person or a pet who just helps you feel a little bit safe, feel okay? You're welcome. You can be there. Right? Some people had ancestors, that they didn't know, but they felt that connection to. Some of my clients had spirit guides, whatever you find.
Right.
I had clients who would, followed people on, on YouTube or on whatever, and those great, whatever it is that your nervous system feels connected to. So that's who, and then a what is a very small thing you can do, right? Not a great big practice, but a small thing you can do. Like maybe you take a breath and you notice it. Maybe you turn on some music. Maybe you look out the window. Simple things, right? And then where are places that you wander through over the course of your day where you feel a bit safe? Often for my clients, there's a place in nature, right? Maine is filled with, open space, and, is there a place where you feel a bit of welcome and you'd like to just stay there for a moment, right? And then touchstones are interesting because they're like the favorite sweater we put on whenever we're needing a lift, right? Or the lucky socks, or, there's something that we put on. There's something we smell. So fragrance, you can find a fragrance that just, that feels good, right? And then objects, things we touch, we hold, we look at, right? So where we smell, we touch, we hold. These are touchstones, and I think everybody can find a touchstone.
Absolutely.
Right?
Well, yeah, it's the old T-shirt that you won't get rid of.
Never get rid of that one. Exactly. Exactly.
I mean, that's probably why people are probably wondering why. Well, maybe it's because you feel safe, and it gives you a sense of safety and comfort on some level. Or the meal that you're making, that mom used to make, your mom or your dad used to make, or grandma or grandpa.
We talk about comfort food. Well, comfort food is your nervous system is saying that brings me a sense of okayness.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. And then your brain will give you all the memories about why, which is lovely to have as well. But it started with your nervous system saying yes.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So I think the other thing that the simple thing that people can do to make an assessment about should I or shouldn't I do whatever is to ask your nervous system, when I think about doing whatever it is, this feels filling in my nervous system, or this feels draining. It's either going to fill you so you feel regulated, or it's going to disrupt and drain so that you feel a survival. If you just start with that question first, then you can explore further, but it gives you a place to start. Does my nervous system say yes? Or, the other thing is, does my nervous system say yes, which would feel filling and, oh yes, let's try that. Does it say no? And it's very clearly saying, draining, disruptive, no. Or does it say maybe? So our nervous system can say maybe, which is that sort of, I don't know, I'm on the fence. If it says yes, go ahead and do it. If it says no, don't do it. If it says maybe, be curious and explore. Right?
Right. Exactly. I'm really glad that you broke it down that way. Yeah. And, and all of the activities that you just mentioned, people's like, yeah, I've heard that before. I heard this before, and the thing is, you might have heard of it and not really realize the power that it has. But this is the science about why. What you've just talked about, the polyvagal theory, is the science around why these things are really important to put into place. It's to settle down your nervous system and for you to get to know your nervous system on a different level. And when your nervous system is settled, guess what? You're going to rest and heal as well, right?
Yes.
All connected.
Yeah. And I think, for my clients, especially, they were all trauma survivors, and understanding the science underneath something gave them more of a reason to try something, to really stick with it and begin to notice the subtle changes that happen. Right.
Hmm.
Yes, we can, people give you suggestions all the time,
Right.
but if you understand how it works, then you can choose. That's the other thing I would say is we each have our own menu of things that work for us,
Right.
right? So, I might choose music, and you might say, "Oh God, I'm never going near music," right? And it's perfectly fine because we create our own menus. So the thing I will say, when you look on the internet and people say, "Here are the 10 things to do to whatever the goal is," ask your nervous system how it feels about each of those 10 things,
Right.
right? In the beginning of the pandemic, when we were getting all of those suggestions in our inboxes, I started feeling like there must be something really wrong with me because I didn't want to do any of them. And my nervous system said, "Dude, that does not work for me." And I
Right.
finally came to the realization that the people who were putting out the 5 things to do, they were simply telling me what works for their nervous system. That's all.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So everybody can put out 5 things to do and say, "This is what works for me." Right? And I
Exactly.
encourage you to do that. Create your own menu, your own list. Say, "Here's what works for me."
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Everybody's different. And I think it's important to say, well, yeah, that worked for you. It's not working for me. That doesn't make it wrong,
Oh, no.
bad,
Yeah.
or,
Yeah.
it's just that's what worked for me. And so there are suggestions, but you might come up with your own. I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I find it disconcerting when people are very quick to criticize and judge when if you could just take a step back and
Yeah.
look at what the process is, what the goal is, and maybe find your own. Um,
Mhm.
and then if it doesn't work for you, it's not because there's anything wrong with you. You just you're just different.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I do when I teach, I say there's no right or wrong way.
Right.
There's just the way of your nervous system. And
Right.
that's what this process is all about, knowing what your nervous system wants to say yes to. That's all. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why I look for different programs, because some people just don't connect with one program. So try a different one and see if your nervous system can connect
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
that program as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, we actually are over time. And so I want to make sure that you have had the chance to say everything that you would like to say. And then I
Ooh,
want to just let people know about where to find you. Do you have any anything that you haven't talked about, just to sort of put the
yeah.
bow?
Well, I would like to say it because we've talked a lot about regulation, and I would like to say that the goal is not to be regulated all the time because
Hmm.
it's inachievable for anybody,
Hmm.
right? The goal is to know when I've dysregulated and have ways to come back to regulation.
Hmm.
And that actually, as you dysregulate and come back, builds resilience. Right?
Hmm.
So for we adults in our kids, right, we want them to dysregulate and regulate, right? That builds resilience. That builds a nervous system that is strong, right? So for us, many of us have dysregulated for a long time, and it's really what are the pathways back to regulation, and then just practice those. Yeah, yeah,
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm so glad you said that. Yeah. Building resilience, flexibility, adaptability. And that's not just for the mind and the nervous system. It's also the body, which is metabolic flexibility and resilience too. Right.
right. Because as you say that, survival responses are metabolically costly, right?
Hmm.
They're very challenging for the body.
Hmm.
Right? When we're in regulation, we have a lovely, healthy homeostasis. But every time I, get flooded with cortisol and adrenaline and in sympathetic protection, it's costly to my system, which is often why you then end up crashing into dorsal,
Right.
right? Yeah. So we can see it in the science of the way your body is working, even. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So great. So I see that people can contact you at www.rhythmofregulation.com. And Did you say you were on Instagram or you're not?
I am not. I am not on any social media so far.
Okay, good for
Protected
you.
myself from all of that. Yes.
Right, right. And you're going to give us a link to your personal profile map
And the directions.
and directions, which is awesome. Thank you so much for that. I have had so much pleasure talking to you about this wonderful, great topic, very important topic. And I look forward to someday meeting you in person since we are not too far from
Not
each
too far
other.
apart. That
Yeah,
would be
yeah,
great.
yeah. So thank you so much, Deb. I really appreciate your time today.
Fun. Thank you.